Okay, so remember I said last time there's sort of 3 steps to Kant's argument, answering these 3 questions. What is good? Kant will say a good will. What is a good will? For Kant, one that acts from duty. Follows the moral rules because they are rules. How do we know what our duty is? How do we know what these rules are? For Kant, the formulations of the categorical imperative. Now look, I want to talk about each step of Kant's argument. He gives arguments for each of these claims. I want to look and see what they are. Now this lecture I want only to really focus on this first claim. What is good? Kant will say the good will. Let's talk about what Kant's argument is, what he means, what his method is. So Kant says nothing can be good without qualification except the good will. What does this talk of good without qualification mean? What it means is it can't be bad in any circumstances. You can't imagine it being bad. You can't imagine it not being good. Kant thinks that the good will is the only thing this is going to hold for. He'll talk about some other candidates, and he'll say that it doesn't hold for them. So Kant will take these other candidates, happiness, skills, traits of character, and he'll imagine a situation where this thing isn't good, where it's bad. Happiness, you guys might already know, is the one the utilitarian is going to say is good. Kant will say, no, you utilitarians are wrong. Here are some cases where happiness is a bad thing. That'll show that you guys are wrong to define happiness as what's good. Skills, traits of character, we haven't really talked about those, but Kant will also say, well, we might think a skill like intelligence, charm, sense of humor, we might say that that's good, but it really can only be good if certain conditions are met. Having a good will is the condition of that. I'll show you why, right? Traits of character, what you might even call virtues, self-control, courage. Again, you might point to somebody who has courage or who has self-control and say, well, that's a good thing. Kant will say, well, no. Those are only good if the person has a good will. I can point out cases to you where they're not good, and they're not good because the person doesn't have a good will. So he'll eliminate each of these other candidates, and he'll show not only can they not be what is good without qualification, good in every case you can imagine, he'll also try to show, well, them being good depends on the person having a good will. Let's see how this argument works, though. So let's start with happiness. And Kant thinks of happiness more or less as the utilitarian does. Happiness is pleasure and the absence of pain. Well, so why isn't happiness good without qualification? Well, Kant says you can easily think of cases where happiness isn't good. Kant would say, well, happiness is bad if it comes from something morally evil, right? Think about this. Think about the sick, twisted joy that some serial killer might get from murdering his victims. Kant would say there is nothing good about the happiness this person gets from his crimes. It's just bad because it has a bad source. Now, the utilitarian, on the other hand, would say, well, no, it's happiness is good no matter what the source might be. It just so happens that the pleasure the serial killer gets from murdering his victims is way outweighed by the pain it does elsewhere. But the utilitarian would have to say even the pleasure of the serial killer is good just that it's really outweighed by pain elsewhere and by pleasure that his actions cost others. Kant would say, nonsense, there's nothing at all good about the sick pleasure of this twisted person. Kant would also say that happiness is bad if the person doesn't deserve it. Even sort of innocent happiness can be bad if the person doesn't deserve to be happy. And you might be thinking, well, that seems kind of nasty, that seems kind of mean. But think about this, right? Think about Nazi war criminals. Good examples because no one likes Nazi war criminals, at least hopefully. Think about someone like Dr. Mengele. Mengele was this person who did horrible experiments on other human beings during the Holocaust. Mengele escaped, and he escaped, I forget where in South America, but he escaped to South America, and he lived out his days basically as a farmer. And now look, is it good that Mengele is happy after he gets away? He just gets to sit on his farm, has a fine old life. No, right? I think most of us would think, even if Mengele's current joys don't have any sick source, even if he just has the joys of a farmer living on a farm, his pleasure isn't good because he doesn't deserve it. And I'll give you guys another example. Idi Amin. Idi Amin was this horrible dictator, just also a terrible human being. Murdered his political opponents, started a war with the neighboring country. He was in charge of Uganda. He started a war. He lost. He had to run. War killed a lot of people. Saudi Arabia gave this terrible guy, Idi Amin, asylum. And Idi Amin, this horrible mass murderer, just spent his days just kind of lounging by the poolside, having fun, right? Now again, nothing wrong with lounging by the poolside, having fun generally, but we would think, or at least a lot of us would, it's not good that Idi Amin is happy. Why? He doesn't deserve to be happy. He deserves some kind of punishment for what he's done. So does Dr. Mengele. And so Kant would say, well, look, what makes happiness not good here? It's the absence of the goodwill. Serial killer's not happiness isn't good because it comes from a sick source. He has a bad will. Mengele and Idi Amin's happiness is not good. Why? Because they have a bad will. They don't deserve it. The utilitarian, on the other hand, would be forced to say, even someone like Mengele, even someone like Idi Amin, their happiness is a good thing. Pleasure, the absence of pain, always good things, no matter who might feel it. Kant will say absolutely not. Okay, so skills I think we can handle much more quickly, right? It's not so hard to see why they aren't good without qualification. Why Kant thinks them being good depends on the person having a good will. If you are incredibly charming, well, that might be good if you use your charm to advance some good political cause. If, on the other hand, you use your charm to defraud people out of money, it's very bad that you're charming, right? The skill of being charming, of having charisma, that's not good if the person misuses it. Intelligence, if the person uses their intelligence to try to come up with a cure for cancer, that's very good. If the person uses their intelligence, again, to cheat people out of money, that's very bad. Or if the person uses their intelligence to try to come up with some horrible poison that they'll use to kill somebody without detection, again, that's very bad. Intelligence, charisma being good things depend on the person having a good will. If the person has a bad will, these can be misused. They are very bad. They actually make the person worse because he can do more damage. Finally, for a similar reason, traits of character can't be good without qualification. Think about courage or temperance, right? Well, if you have a bad will, or if another person has a bad will, courage or temperance just make them more able to put their bad intentions into practice. If, in a good world, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any Nazis. If there are going to be Nazis, we would all hope that they are cowards who have no self-control, right? If they're afraid to leave their houses, they can do a lot less damage. If they're so intemperate that they can't control themselves long enough to carry out their nasty plans, that's better than if they have a lot of self-control and can put their plans into action. Or think of this, right? If you think back to the 9/11 bombings, there was a huge debate. This comedian Bill Maher got in a lot of trouble, kicked off a lot of controversy, because George W. Bush had said, well, the 9/11 bombers are cowards. Bill Maher said, well, whatever else you say about these guys, you're not a coward if you face certain death to accomplish your goals. And Kant would say, well, the thing is here, Bill Maher is right. These guys aren't cowards. Our mistake, the reason we get outraged at someone like Maher, is because we think courage is always a good thing. No, no, no. If you are a murderous terrorist, it is very bad that you have courage. It makes you more capable of killing people. Look, if you are a fireman and you are rushing in to a burning building to save people, that's very good that you have courage. Courage here is only good because the person has a good will. If he had a bad will, his courage would be something entirely different. Temperance, self-control, that might be good, but only if I have a good will, right? If you think of a doctor, someone studying to be a doctor, and she wants to help people, and she has the self-control that she can sit there and do her studies, be a success in med school, well, that's great, right? Her temperance, her self-control is good. If someone is self-controlled because he's trying to, carry out some evil plan and he needs self-control to put that into action, think of Lex Luthor in the Superman comics. He's very self-controlled. That just makes him worse, right? So, quote-unquote, good traits of character, only good if you have a good will. Now keep this in mind, because Aristotle will try to define the good will. He'll agree with Kant in a certain respect that only the good will is good, but he'll actually try to define it in terms of character traits like courage, temperance, and the other, what he calls virtues. How is he going to meet this objection Kant makes that, quote-unquote, good traits of character are very bad if you have a bad will? That's something worth thinking about. How does Aristotle get around this in a way that he's going to try to define a good will in terms of these character traits? Because we certainly think you can have them without having a good will. That's a point to keep in mind for later in the course. This will be very important for Aristotle. All right, so hopefully, though, we understand at least the first step of Kant's argument.